This is Office Talk with Annette Stepanian. We all know that words matter, right? As a lawyer, we're usually pretty careful about the words that we use, whether it's in a contract or a conversation, because we literally argue over words all the time and the interpretation of those words. But I didn't realize how important words are when we are writing an email for a new product that we're launching, or we're writing a sales page. That's why I wanted to bring on copywriter Sarah Grear to talk all about copy and how we can better utilize copy to help drive sales and engagement with our audience. I'm the first to admit that writing copy sometimes feels very overwhelming for me, even though I naturally like to write, but writing copy in a way that engages a reader is very different than legal writing. So Sarah is sharing some of her expert tips on how you can write better copy without getting overwhelmed. With that said, let's go to the show. Hey Sarah, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, you're so welcome, Annette. I love getting to hang out and talk to you, and then having your audience here is the bonus.
You're so sweet. It seems like we've known each other for quite a while. We've been kind of running around in the same circles, and we recently reconnected a few months ago at Rick Mulready's conference, which was such a nice surprise. You're speaking there. But why don't you bring our listeners up to speed on who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, so I was at Rick's event, the in-house copy conversion expert, and it was really fun to talk to everybody about how they're writing their copy for their business. And if anybody who's listening isn't familiar with copywriting, it's basically the words you use on your website or in a launch campaign or in a funnel on your website to help sell more of your services and products. So I love helping people amplify their sales. That's the fun part for me.
I'm sure people love you for loving that.
Yeah, totally. It's a win-win for everybody.
So copy. Okay, why are words so important? I don't know. I mean, I know as a lawyer, you got to be really careful about the words that you use, but why should we be focusing so much on the words?
Yeah, so it lays the groundwork and the framework for your launch if you're working on launching something specific, or even for your website. People get attracted to the language that you use to describe what you do. And the reason why copy is so great is if you have a great copywriter you're working with, or you're DIYing your copy, the idea is to tell people what's unique about you and weave that into all the different parts of your brand so that you become memorable, basically, and it allows them, whenever they're looking to solve a certain problem, hopefully you're using the exact language that they use around that problem, and then you give them the solution and you tell them how you do it differently than everybody else and why you're the best one to help them solve that problem. So when all that is clearly communicated across all your different platforms, if you have a sales page, if you're writing copy for a Facebook ad, whatever you're doing, as long as you clearly communicate what you have to offer, people buy that clarity because they want it for themselves.
Yeah, so you said a lot there. I think I don't want to overlook it, and if you're listening to this, maybe you want to rewind and listen to that again, because you basically laid it all out of what you need to do. And so the fact that it was so succinct doesn't mean that it wasn't important. So clarity, that's really hard to do sometimes because as entrepreneurs, we have so much in our heads and we understand the value of what we're doing. We're so passionate about our products and our services. How can we start conveying that in a way that resonates to the reader or the website visitor?
Yeah, there's a ton of ways. The good news is there's a lot of tools that you can use, and I can give you guys some specific examples. So, for example, if you have a Facebook group that you either run or you're a part of, you can start to ask people really good questions about the problem that you solve and get the exact words from them and start to use that in your own copy. It's funny because people think that writing the copy is the big thing to overcome. But really, the first thing you need to start doing before you write is research. You need to read a lot of copy before you start writing copy, in my opinion. So again, Facebook groups, asking really good questions in there. You might, if you lead meetups, you might want to ask people while you're there. For me personally, I would ask them, what's the one thing that's tripping you up about getting your website and writing your copy? Like, what's the one thing that, is stopping you from profiting from your online presence? Something like that. And then I would get that exact language and I would use it in a promotion for myself. There's also listening to podcasts like this, you might get some ideas if people are talking about problems that they have, and you could think about how you're going to solve them. And then there's a great website that I love where you can do research around specific keywords as well, and it's called answerthepublic.com. And if you put in a word into that site, it will actually make this beautiful map of all the things people say around that specific word as you type online. Yeah, it's amazing.
Okay, we're going to have to link that to the show notes. Thank you for that. I almost want to go on there now and check it out. And I'm going to probably spend my whole afternoon on there, looking up.
It's addicting.
Yeah, let me look up contracts and, Pokemon. The time that you invest reading good copy is probably where you want to focus first. Why is that so important? Is it because you're trying to dissect, why did this ad move me? Are you trying to analyze your own behavior to see what elements were memorable for you or caused you to take action, or?
Yeah, so the reason I recommend starting with the research is because I feel like people have already done the groundwork for you. You don't need to reinvent the wheel completely. There's things out there for you to get inspiration, and start your copy there where someone who's really successful online, and you can get the framework of what they've already created and reverse engineer that for your own copy, so that the more you read copy, the more familiar, and you'll start to see all these common threads. If you look at 5 Facebook ads, for example, if you went on addicted.io, ADICTED.io, so there's just one D in there, and you can look up anybody's Facebook ads for the last 6 months or further back, and you can see there's common threads about why people write Facebook ads the way they do. And when you start to pull out those common threads and then you apply your own brand language, your own ideal customer language into it, then you know that it's already had success, so why go and reinvent that wheel?
Okay, I'm learning a lot about copy, but I'm learning a lot about these crazy websites that I had no idea existed. So you can actually it keeps a documentation of people's Facebook ads on a
It does.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Yeah. Okay, cool. So you also said, you want to be able to to figure out what problem you're solving, and then also then come up with the solution, but then how your solution is different from other people's, right? Am I totally messing up what you said? I think that's what you said.
Okay. That's beautiful.
I always bring the example of McDonald's and, Burger King. The hamburger is not an original idea, and you can go to McDonald's and you can get a 99-cent burger. You can go to a very expensive restaurant and get a $30 hamburger, or Burger King does it a certain way, and McDonald's does it a certain way. So I think that element of how do you make yourself different and stand out from your services and not make yourself a commodity is very, very important. So how do you recommend people approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the cool thing about, standing out in your own market is we're all a unique imprint in the world. So the way that you got to the seat you're sitting in today and the way that I got to the seat that I'm sitting in today is totally different. So all those stories about how we got to where we're at is really what separates us apart. So really learning how to get really good at telling stories that are specifically interesting to your audience. So Annette, for example, tell me, where was your hometown?
Glendale, California.
Glendale!
Whoop,
hey,
whoop.
So I live near Pasadena. We are from a similar area.
We could be neighbors.
We could be neighbors, and then we could talk about all the food places we love and all those stories around the area that we're from. So, for example, if I was talking to you and you were my ideal client and I knew you were from Glendale, I would not strike up a conversation about Alaska with you necessarily.
We talk about the 134 and the traffic and yeah.
Yeah, so that's the same thing with copy. You just want to start to tease out that story that you know is interesting to your ideal client. Don't tell them things they're not interested in. Create bridges between you and them based on the things that you already know about them.
Okay, so the stuff that you already know, that's the stuff you learn in your research phase.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I feel like being a good copywriter means you have to be a good storyteller, obviously. And sometimes people feel like they're not good storytellers. Like they're maybe very like fact-based, like maybe they're just like very to the point. Like how can people start practicing or developing the skill set of becoming a better storyteller and teasing out those commonalities that they might have with their audience and building those bridges? Because for me, I can be very to the point. So how do I take that step back and paint that picture for people to draw them in?
Yeah, totally. And I know coming from the lawyer world, like the language is very direct and to the point. It's funny because I feel like marketing has evolved, and there was a time where a website really was just like an oversized business card, and it was straight up information about the service. And the way things have pivoted is now it's more about creating what I call a brand experience. So I really do recommend that when you're figuring out what stories to tell, you first put yourself in the shoe of your customers, which we've talked about a little bit. And then you want to create some desire for what you have to offer with your customer. And when you're telling stories, definitely think about their own lifestyle and what might inform their own lifestyle. And then that's where you're starting to say, okay, I'm going to talk about, for example, with me, my brand experience that I created on my website is that you do a writing vacation with me. So I know that I love traveling. I also know that most of my audience loves to travel. So the idea is they come with me on this writing vacation instead of just hiring me for a copy package. And I'm pulling them into this brand experience where I'm saying, okay, this is an intensive. It's just going to be me and you. We're going to do this over 3 meetings, 2 revisions. Like I have a very specific way, and that way it allows me to focus on 1 to 2 clients at a time. I'm not overwhelmed, and it really does become like this writing vacation for me. So I try to illustrate a story around the idea of my packaging, and that is a way to make myself memorable, connect with them in a way that I know they're interested in hearing more about, and then create that experience for them.
That's cool. That does sound kind of nice. Writing vacation with maybe some margaritas.
Totally.
I'm sure you could get some good stories out of me if I've had a cocktail. I only need one. And I'm such a lightweight. So, okay. Okay, cool. So, okay, let's say you are writing emails. Now, it seems like everybody knows an email is kind of like gold, right? That's really where you want to spend a lot of your time because that is the only asset that you own versus social media, right? So you want to cultivate that relationship with your audience. How can you write emails and subject lines and all that to get people to open them consistently and to take action on them? What kind of tips do you have, or what are things that you're seeing that are working with your clients?
Oh, this is such a great question. So again, I start in the research phase. So if you're looking for subject lines for your specific audience, what I recommend people do if you're feeling stuck and you don't have any ideas off the top is to go to like your local library or local grocery store and go to the magazine section and look at all the subject lines on the rack. Yeah. Because they're there for you already. These agencies spent thousands of dollars trying to figure out what would get somebody to pick that magazine up off the rack. So I take my phone, I take pictures of all the headlines of the magazines. And for me, like an example is I would use Entrepreneur magazine because I mainly serve entrepreneurs. So for someone in the health world, you might choose a magazine that's specific to your ideal client, and then you would get ideas. So some of the things that I know convert well right now, if you put just some off-the-cuff examples, you could put sneak peek in your headline. That tends to get opened quite often. You could do anything with how-to in it. And the same with Facebook ads. It's funny because a lot of things that would get people to click on a Facebook ad would also get them to open an email. So you can actually... Yeah, you can use that copy in more than one place. You can maximize it. And so if you write all your emails, some of those headlines could totally be used on your Facebook ads. But Magazine Rack is a great place to start. And then people love case studies too. And I always tell, as an idea, like you don't have to necessarily write a case study about one of your clients. You could totally write case studies about well-known people who are out there doing things that you admire or whatever it may be. And there's somebody who would be interesting to your client. So if there's a TV show that you love or whatever it is, you could kind of do a case study and dissect what they're doing, or a brand that you love if you want to do, I don't know, something on Virgin Galactic, or if that was interesting to your audience. You could case study them and use that, and people tend to open those too. And, you might say the mistakes that they did, and that's kind of polarizing. People are like, oh, what did she say about them? Yeah. So those are some fun ideas to play with.
Yeah, one thing that I do is I pay a lot of attention, and we talked about this a little bit before. I pay a lot of attention to what grabs my attention. So if I get emails that I subscribe to, or if I get ads, my Facebook stream or whatever, I stop and I analyze it. Surprise, surprise, as a lawyer. I analyze, I'm like, what was it about the subject line? And it's not to copy it, but just to pay attention to why was this so intriguing to me, and to figure that out. And so I think sometimes it's also remembering that you are also a consumer of emails and ads and things, and just, to the extent that you are similar to your ideal clients, I think there's something that you could learn from your own experience as well.
Yeah, raising your awareness for sure around what gets you to open something or pay attention to something is so good, because chances are if you're interested in it, your ideal client probably is too. Because what I found in today's online world is a lot of people are really aligned with who their ideal client are. They can either be exactly like them or have a lot of commonalities already, like there's threads between their life that, so as long as you, like you said, you're aware of the things that make you interested, that probably would be something good for your audience too.
You also brought up something that I think is a really good thing to talk about, is you said, that with the email subject lines and the Facebook ads, surprisingly, you see some correlation with the copy that you use, that if, it works well on email, it's probably going to work well on Facebook. Is there anything that maybe doesn't correlate or doesn't translate from one medium over to another that we should be thinking about?
No, I wouldn't really say there's anything that doesn't translate, but the way that I go about creating the copy is I usually start with the sales page. So, for example, you have an offer you want to put out there and you're going to sell it to your audience. I would start with creating the sales page, because a lot of that copy ends up getting used in the emails and even some in the opt-in page. Like, usually if you're going to sell something, you start with a free offer first, just to warm up the audience and let them know who you are and give them some kind of small win that they can get excited about. And then they go through that first free training or free value that you have to offer to them, a download or something. And then once they're on your list, you then kind of connect with them more on the emails. But the funny thing is, everything starts with the sales page. So even though that's the last thing they see, I always tell people to create that copy first, because that clarity, again, that piece of clarity will run through all the different pieces that you're creating, all the copy components. Because a launch has a lot of components. You've probably figured this out in that.
Yeah, I wouldn't go at it alone. Because if you're creating the course or the content, and then there's that one piece of it, and then there's a whole piece of like the launch, and trying to do both at the same time will drive you bananas. And so you definitely either don't do both at the same time and or get help, but probably more of the latter, get help. So like Sarah, bring somebody on who can do that stuff for you while you focus your energy on the things that only you can do.
I'll actually speak to that a little bit. So I have a client recently. We did a launch for her. She got 8,000 new opt-ins, and she went from making $250,000 to $500,000 in her launch. Now, she had kind of plateaued the years before. There was a lot of years where she just kept making around $250,000 a year. And so what was the difference, right? And so I was really observing her and her team. And it's funny because we're talking about this getting support piece. It was that she needed the right support in the right places. So it's not that she didn't have any support at all, but she needed the right people in the right seats for things to really, double her revenue, basically. So it's good to get support, and, we all have to go through our evolution of, receiving that support.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And then you get to a certain point where it's like, you've got to really be strategic about, okay, if I'm going to invest in this launch, I know I'm going to get a return. How much am I willing to invest? You've got to stretch yourself a little bit, because when you do that and you get the people who really know what they're doing in each respective area of your launch, you're going to see, double the results or more. So.
Yep. That makes me just want to sign you up. I want to work with you. I have all these people. I'm like, oh, who would be my dream team?
Yeah.
So, let's talk about that. What can somebody expect when they hire someone like you, or, you or someone like you, like a copywriter? And I know your process is a little different than others, but can you just kind of touch generally upon what it's like working with a copywriter?
Yeah, I love this conversation. So for somebody who's just getting started and they're thinking about hiring a copywriter, I would, for the reason that I said earlier, I would start by just hiring them to do your sales page, so that you can feel what it's like to work with a copywriter, make sure you like it, all of that stuff. If you're a little more seasoned and you've done some launches, you already have a small team, then I would recommend considering hiring quite a few different people to your team and letting them handle the parts that they know is their zone of genius. And it's funny because I bill myself as a copywriter, but I definitely do more than that. And for me, it came out of necessity, kind of, because because the copywriter is usually on the ground floor of the launch, so things are just getting started. You're writing all these pages that are going to go live, but you're the first one to meet with the client and start the direction of the launch. So I've actually started creating launch maps for my clients so that they know the flow of all the emails that happen before the free training, all the emails that happen after that, the sales page, whether or not people say yes or no. If you're doing retargeting Facebook ads, you can tell just from me talking about it, there's so much. So what I've learned is they need to see it in a visual map. I just map it out for them. I use a tool called My Map in Google Drive, and I map everything out. And it's funny because I'll have that first call with them. They tell me their project scope. I can already tell usually on that first call that they're a little overwhelmed by what they're trying to do. And I'll basically translate everything they say into that map, and I'll send it to them before they hire me. And as soon as I send the map, they're like, yep, you're hired.
Yeah, because it's like the easy button, you're giving them something, such a value add that, that makes their life easy.
Yeah, and then I actually translate the map into a master editorial calendar, and I house all the links in there for them to all their Google Docs, their lead pages if they're using that, their optimized press links if they're using that for their sales page. I basically give a home to all the components. Now, they might be using something like that, but this is really, I've come up with a really streamlined system so that as everybody's working on the launch together, if there's multiple people on the team, they can all go to this one document and it's the home for everything and nobody gets lost. Everybody knows where to go. It just saves so much time. Again, out of necessity, I was like, I really want to save myself time and everyone else time to not ask me for links 5 times. But then it serves everyone. And if you're going to do a launch multiple times, then you can always just go in there and grab everything that you need each time you go to do it. So it makes it way more convenient.
Nice. I love it. Anything. I'm kind of nerdy like that too, where I'm really organized about. It's because you realize how much time you waste on searching for things. And you're like, this was 10 minutes of my time just looking for a stupid link that I could have just put. So I'm a big proponent of that. But when someone comes to you and they want to sit down and they're just kind of mental, dump all over you, for lack of a better word. What is that process? What can somebody, what do they need to do? Where do they need to be? How do they need to prepare in order to, or do they need to do anything before they start working with you? Or you just come in and you know the questions to ask and how to kind of untangle all the stuff in their brain?
Yeah, I'm pretty good at guiding them through it, but most people, honestly, a lot of my clients are in some kind of high-level mastermind. So, with like a James Wedmore with his Inner Circle group, or Ryan Levesque's group in New York, they're part of some kind of high-level mastermind where they do a lot of the business strategy directly with their coach. And so they have a rough idea of what the marketing plan is, but they've kept it all in their head. And so I'm the one who, I know which questions to ask, and I definitely lead them through it. And then, like I said, I take all of what's been in their head and I put it in a map. And then they're like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I need. So they all have different strategies, but they're not hugely, most of my clients will follow some kind of formula. We'll definitely tweak it, based on their brand and their audience and all these things. But a lot of people use the product launch formula from Jeff Walker, or they use the quiz opt-in from Ryan Levesque, or, so I see there's common strains between all of these different types of launches. And so they'll tell me, who they're working with as their coach, and I can usually go, oh yeah, I already have all that laid out. I know how to do that.
That's cool. So what do you see? I'm actually really curious because you're on the ground floor of a lot of launches for a lot of, big folks who are doing amazing things in the space. So what are you seeing really working? And you don't have to reveal people, but what are one or two things or maybe trends you're seeing that you're like, oh, this is on the horizon and it's doing really well?
Yeah, so leading edge for launches right now is it's something that I put together for one of my clients, and now when other people hear about it, they're like, ooh, I want to do that too, Sarah. So it's great for me because I'm like, this works. So I had a client, she had the 3-part video series, the product launch formula type of launch in the past. So the audience watches 3-part video, and then on the 4th video, it pitches an offer and they can go to the sales page. So we took her existing formula that she knew was working for her, but she was ready to, increase her results. And I said, do the 3-part video. And then instead of the 4th video that's just a sales video, instead do the 4th video as a live webinar. And so we did the 3-part video, the live webinar on the tail end, and we framed it as a 10-day challenge, and people ate it up. We had 50% show up on her webinar.
Oh, wow.
It was so beautiful, and I was so grateful. But I was like, oh, there's something to this and we did a scholarship giveaway on the webinar, so you had to show up live to be available. Yeah.
Oh, that's smart. And then the 10-day challenge started after the webinar? Or
no, the 10-day challenge was the first video release.
Okay.
Till the webinar. So we didn't have a touch point every day of those 10 days, but we just called it a 10-day challenge, and it got people excited.
Okay. That's amazing. It blows my mind. There's it's like a buffet of there are so many things that you could pick and, in different combinations of things that you could put on your plate. And I think that's where people get overwhelmed. That's so great to hear that all these things are working, but I'm thinking about the person who's maybe in their first or second year and maybe this is their first launch. How do they get started when they're like, do I do a challenge? Do I do Facebook Live? Do I do a webinar? Do I do a Jeff Walker? Do I do it's just so overwhelming. And then what happens is they get stuck and they never make progress, or it's just kind of where would you recommend that they start? Or what questions should they ask themselves?
Yeah, so I think the best thing to do first is to assess yourself and realize where your strengths are. So if your strengths are talking live in front of a camera, then go out, do Facebook Lives leading up to your launch and do a live webinar. If you are not so into being in front of the camera, you could do a live webinar that's mainly slides. So you can just show up in the beginning, say hi, and then go to the slides. So definitely think about, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, focus on your strengths. I can't say that enough. And then also, don't look at these bigger launches and think that out the gate you're going to do that. I would recommend scaling back your ideas. Just if you see a 10-day challenge with a 3-part video and webinar like I just talked about, just start with the webinar. See if that's getting you results. Test it out. Test different opt-in pages. Be willing to experiment in the beginning, and don't put all your eggs in one launch basket. Like, oh, I'm going to do this one launch and I have to get amazing results from it. That's like the worst energy you can bring to a launch.
Yeah.
And it's an easy pitfall. Like everyone, I mean, I remember doing my first launch and putting a lot of pressure on it. Like, this has to work. And then, you know, I was fortunate to supplement my income with private client work. And that I realized was working so much better for me that I just moved in the direction of the low-hanging fruit. I'm like, I'm good at working with people one-on-one and I'm happy, so I'm going to continue to do it. And sometimes I feel like, and this is the bigger question, it's like a bigger thing to crack open for people is, do you really want to do an online program, or do you just want the results you see everyone else having? So you've got to decide, you know, like, and there's ways to do launches to get private clients too. And people only think about, I have to launch this program and scale it up and all of that. But you need a little more patience with yourself, a little more grace, be a little more gentle, and, you know, start small, test things out. Don't expect them to be this watershed of money the first time. You're probably going to invest and lose money a lot of the times. So yeah, it's because over time you'll get to know your audience better, and your name will get out there more, and people will start to recognize you, and things will start to, you'll get that momentum and you'll hit that tipping point and have all the amazing big launches other people do, but it takes time to get there. And I think people forget about that piece. They just want to monetize right away. Like,
yeah. Yeah, and I love everything that you said, and I want to like underscore it because it's so true. It's so true. And like, I mean, to the point that, you know, what someone else is doing may not be something you want. So first of all, you have to figure that out for yourself. But let's say it is, like, you forget that these people do have a lot of help. Some people have been doing this for a long time. So we don't necessarily see or hear about the things that didn't go well, you know, and it's just, I think to your point, you know, I really believe you show up every day, you do the best you can, and you need to feel good with that and not always, you know, don't compare yourself to others. You can be inspired by others and motivated by it, but don't compare yourself because you're never comparing apples to apples. And it just robs you of any joy or progress that you might be making. I love everything that you just said there. One question I just had to ask, because you are probably someone who loves words. What is your favorite word?
It changes over time. Of course, we all evolve. I have a few that I've been focused on lately, but I would say my number one favorite word is celebration. I love to celebrate. So it's really the feeling behind the word more so than the word. Like if we were just saying what's my favorite word in general, it'd be like ampersand. I love that word. But for me, the feeling behind the words are what really stick. And, you know, even as a copywriter, it's really the feeling that you're creating that matters so much more than the words.
That's great. I love it. I have to say serendipity is a fun word too. It kind of makes me happy. Serendipity. And you can't say it without smiling. So.
Totally. And it's got my name in it, so you can't go wrong.
Oh, that's so funny. Awesome. Let's wrap up with the final question, which is the one thing I know for sure is, and I ask you to fill in the blank.
Yes. The one thing I know for sure is that your next work is your best work.
Aw, I love that. Thank you, Sarah, for taking the time to be here today.
Oh, you're so welcome. I appreciate you.
Such good stuff in that episode. I've actually listened to it a few times because I think there's so many great nuggets, not just about writing copy, but about how we can approach our businesses in a way that feels good to us and doesn't really overwhelm us and makes use of where we are at this point in time. If you'd like to learn more about Sarah and to also get your hands on her free quick start guide about how to build better websites that engages your readers and website visitors, then head on over to the show notes. You can find that over at AnnetteStepanian.com/podcast/39. With that said, my friend, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I can't wait to talk to you later.